Welcome to today's town hall. I appreciate you bearing with me and waiting a week. I had an issue with the registrations last week, so uh, I showed up and there wasn't the appropriate number of people that we needed or usually have on this on these monthly town halls. So I look to postpone it to this week. So again, I appreciate everyone's everyone's time and patience. Um, so we're going to be rehashing uh 223. Last time we were kind of looking at, hey, this update's coming out, and today the update has been out, and everyone's been updating to it. So we're just going to rehash what update 223 includes. And we'll also be there's been some changes with the uh, ecosystem updates for NISTA CMMC. So we will be talking about that as well. And then, of course, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the questions area on the app, and we will go from there. So for update 223, there's been one of the biggest things that we added was the system health and maintenance report. We also updated some things on the compliance area. The compliance help page had some dead links, so that's all been updated. Of course, since everything has been unified under a DoD CIO, so with all those new links, that new website, everything has been pointed in that direction. We've also reworked some of the Windows agent defaults, and we updated underlying system security and dependencies. So it's not something that you will visually see with NeQter, but an important piece of making sure the underlying operating system of NeQter, the Ubuntu, is kept up to date and kept up to snuff. So I have quite a few slides here. I went over this last time, just the system health and maintenance report, but I'll actually just show off my demo system, breaking down the different elements or the different areas of the system maintenance report. So let me jump to that now. So for the system health and maintenance report, it's going to be up at the top right, and in the report scheduling area, much like the other reports, we're talking about this one right here, health and maintenance report. So one of the only things I'm going to ask to see if there are any changes that we can make to, because if you have a bunch of if you have a bunch of alerts or a list of different vulnerability tasks and what have you, because that all gets listed out in here in this report, sometimes when you so I'll go to run this report. Sometimes it's going to it's generating in the background here, so it's going to take a second. So I have this on my demo system. So if you hit to run that report and it looks like this and it hangs a bit, it's generating. It just takes a second for it to come up here. So just to kind of break down what we're going to be able to see with this new report. So this report really helps our support team, with different kind of low hanging fruit questions or things that can be, quickly eyeballed. So just to start off at the top here, so we're going to have the exact time it was generated, just some simple, system type information. So we know this is a tier two. We have the customer ID at the top here. license information. So these are all things we can see on the home screen, but just listed out in this report. Current version installed 223, and then current version reported by the update server. So if there's a disparity there, if you're on an older version, you'll be able to clearly see it here. Now, under the user information area, we'll see total users, how many of those users are admins, and then if any of those users are LDAP users. So we'll see that in this section. For backup settings, most importantly, we'll see, do we have backups enabled for archives? Yes. And we can see, visual logs, archive logs. So this is something that, can be used as a proof point. And we're going to be doing that more and more. This was just it was originally kind of a manifestation of a support script that we run on the support team side. But then we thought that there would be value to add this for everyone and see it in the front end rather than having it hidden behind, you know, running support mode, accessing your system and things that we typically see, in Ubuntu. We brought it to the front. So this is our kind of, hey, let's get this report out. Let's get this report included and get our eyes on this information. But some of the things that we want to do later on is having kind of like a NeQter settings report to help with different things for provability of CMMC. So this right here, this can be used as a kind of a proof point when it comes to, okay, well, what are your log retention settings? Okay, well, this report right here says we have 35 days of visual and 180 days worth of archived. We can see if we do have remote backups enabled. And of course, if the tool set itself or NeQter settings are being backed up. So we can see that here. Outside of that, this next section is less important when it comes to hardware. Obviously, we've been around for several years at this point. So we have uh, different customers on different life cycles of hardware. So we have, I don't think we have any first iteration boxes out in the field, but we do have, as we do renewals. Sometimes a client will have a system that's 5-6 years old, needs to get a new one. So this will allow us to see, okay, they're running an older system. But this is going to be much more important for us when it comes to eyeballing virtual environments and virtual machines, because one of the biggest hangups that we have is making sure that the write and read speed on the disk or the IOP side of things is adequate to run NeQter. We of course need solid state drives, so this will be a clear indicator of if solid state drives are present. Because as you can imagine, sometimes we say, hey, we absolutely need SSDs, and then sometimes there's multiple teams involved. Things get lost in translation. NeQter gets installed on regular hard disk drives. Then it starts to fail, or performance isn't great, or indices start to go red. The SIM isn't operating the way it should, and then usually we've historically had to, okay, let's run a support meeting, see what's happening, troubleshoot, and then we run the support script, and then we go, oh, well, we need 300 megabits per second, but we see 12 or something to that effect, right? So this allows us to quickly save time on NeQter side and the client side to say, hey, can you run that report real quick, send it over, and then we can troubleshoot from there. So that's always good to know. But then we can see underlying information, appropriate RAM allocated, appropriate CPU cores allocated. So that's just a little bit, behind the scenes um, of why this is important. And then sometimes, occasionally, on older systems or smaller systems, there's been an issue with Redis memory leakage. eating up or stealing ramp. So this allows us to see that. So maybe a little bit, too in the weeds here, but just wanted to kind of break down what that section provided. Now, the rest of this is, again, things that you can see in the system. So, kind of a summarization of total events or alerts, log on events, if there's any monitored changes detected. Next section, we have hosts. So, we can see um, total hosts, hosts not seen in a bit of time here, 7 days. How many Windows, Linux, and Mac hosts, host with agents, and then the agent version. Again, from a troubleshooting standpoint, sometimes, hey, I'm not seeing this types of information that I'd like to. Um, and then we see, oh, well, you're on, agent version 215, or maybe even for some of our older clients, maybe they didn't update all of their assets. They're on a 211.5, which is a very old version of the agent. So again, you can see and we can see, if obviously if you provide this report to us, we can quickly eyeball and spot discrepancies. Active Directory, the different groups that are listed out that you have. Then moving from there, this is some more behind the scenes stuff where we can see if there's any flagging, any issues with indices. We can see the different indices. So this is going to be a long list right here. Um, but we can see, for some reason, this one here is yellow. Maybe we need to look at that. Um, but again, this is just a bunch of kind of um, tech babble here. I've got a bunch of indices turned on for my demo, so I can show off different vendors and what have you. Then we can also see a full list of every single alert type turned on, and the alert name, how many times it's happened, its description. We can see everything that's turned on in the system, all listed out right here. So that's going to be a long list. Additionally, every single input turned on, and if we've seen it in the last 24 hours. So again, as you know, you go into settings, you can see all this stuff spelled out. We're just putting it in a report. So if you run this report, weekly or monthly, you can look at historically how the NeQter has been performing over time. So we'll keep scrolling here. Same thing with dashboards. All dashboards enabled. We can see all of that turned on and enabled. Again, somebody sometimes they say, "Hey, I have a watch guard pushing, and I don't see, I don't see that dashboard. I don't see those logs." Well, sometimes it's the dashboard wasn't enabled for some reason. So then we can spot that. We can quickly eyeball that here. Um, Integrations, so we can see, okay, is 365 turned on? We can see yes. Is Cisco Meraki turned on? Yes. Is Google Workspace turned on? Yes. So we can see which integrations outside of the traditional inputs or hosts are turned on. And then, for whatever reason, mostly from a testing standpoint, for me personally, I have just a bunch of different vulnerability scan tasks configured and enabled. As you can see here, I need to do a better job of cleaning some out. This one's from 2019, hasn't run since 2019, so I can probably delete that. So this is just going to be a long list for me. For you guys, everyone on the call, you'll probably have less tasks, um, in use. But you'll see it listed here. You can see the last time it ran. We need to extrapolate some more information and add into here, such as like frequency and stuff like that. Again, aligning with different proofs for different objectives is going to be the goal here. And then, let me just scroll. Excuse my scrolling. I told you there was a lot of tasks. I think, yeah, that's the kind of the last section here. So that's what this report is going to provide for us. You can again run it on demand or have it scheduled. It's going to allow us and yourself to eyeball different things, different statuses, so, sometimes if we get a ticket and the symptoms described hey, I'm kind of seeing some performance issues or sluggish, or this isn't running. We can say, you know what, that sounds like a red indice. Um, let's get that report, see if that's detected. Or, okay, well, it is red. Well, why is that? Well, actually, the hardware it's running on isn't, what it needs to be, or aligned with the right tier. Maybe there hasn't been enough RAM given to the NeQter. So that's on the hardware side. But then just some other things, knowing about users and usage, and other things detected on here. So that's what this new report is going to help us with. So we can see on here all those different sections that I broke down are listed out in this PowerPoint. So we'll skip ahead here. So when it comes to the updated compliance help page, what I'm talking about is going to be, um, we go into compliance, and up at the top here, there's this help. So all of these links are now aligned with what they should be and should have been. So if I click on the NIST assessment guide, it takes me right there. And of course I can see, it's been withdrawn, or actually, um, so we have, you know, version 2, anything that you need when it comes to NIST is going to be listed out, or CMMC. So yeah, um that's what that is helping with. And just as a reminder, this was a previous update. But if you haven't been using the NeQter compliance tool, or um, you are shifting from another tool, there is the ability to download the SSP um, uh, template from NeQter. So whether it's CMMC level 1 or level 2, um, you can download the template, add in or adjust your existing Excel to line up with the different fields or columns that we need, and then import that as a net new uh, system security plan into NeQter. So, and we do have the ability, you can download just the template from uh from the create page here. Um so yeah. Um and then outside of that, one of the big things has been this new section here, or rather changing around the different defaults. So for Windows Event ID, the default updates, um, for Active Directory, um, and PC monitoring, a lot has been added to those. The file monitoring remains unchanged. And then we decided to add a high volume events one, where Microsoft recommends that they be monitored, but they were just generating a lot of high volume. So it's kind of dealer's choice from that standpoint, where yes, they're recommended to be monitored, but like we were seeing when we would turn certain things on, it would contribute 60 70% but the logging load would just be this small subset of 3 or 4 event IDs. For example, process creation and termination and stuff like that. So I'll go and I'll make a new group. So we go into Windows logging, we toggle this on, we go into choose event IDs. Now when we go to defaults here, we click on Active Directory monitoring, we can see that we get a big old list. This is referenced. There's a Microsoft blog article of recommended event IDs that should be turned on and sent into Azure Sentinel. So these are the event IDs that they recommend you push into Sentinel. When you draw a line from A to B of the recommended event IDs from Windows or Microsoft rather, and the required events to be logged for CMMC, it's essentially a one-to-one. So all these different ones can now be turned on. So you'll have to just retoggle that recommended group under selecting the event IDs. So that's that one. File monitoring looks very much the same. It's just 5 and object access and policy change. And then the other one that we fleshed out was PC monitoring. You can see it here. So the ones that come down to high volume events, we'll apply this here. We have 5 here, and they are if we look at which ones are turned on, process has been created, process has been exited. That contributes so much traffic. And then the other 3 are object access. Handle to an object was requested, closed, or an attempt was made to duplicate a handle. So obviously, these ones are needed for file monitoring, but they also just kind of throw everything in and the kitchen sink when it comes to, they say, monitor all of the things. Well, yes, within reason, but the log load can be immense, which is why we kind of took those out, put them in high volume, and then it's up to your discretion which ones you want to turn on for that, or if you want to tune them out using the NeQter log tuner. Leave that up to you. So that is that change, that enhancement. Just kind of combing through, reanalyzing, making sure the things are what we need them to be. And let's see, what else do we have? What else do we have here? So high volume events, just talked about that. Yeah. There was a couple fixes. One of them was a security fix. There was a low level TLS vulnerability when attached to our secure syslog. So if somebody was using secure syslog into NeQter, there was a low. So that's been fixed. That was brought to our attention. One of the things that people complained about was just agent groups being reordered when you would edit them. That's been removed. That was kind of a gripe of mine. Fix labels and CMMC controls. Yeah, so just a couple other fixed issues in this update. So outside of NeQter, and again, if anyone has any questions at any time, questions in the chat, it's going to be best for that. So big change between now and the last time we've talked. So the 48 CFR final rule has advanced. On July 22nd, it moved to OIRA, Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA. So that means, set from the July 22nd date, OIRA has 90 days to complete their review. And it's really just kind of getting all ducks in a row. It's not a review to go, should we review this to see if we should do it or not? It's literally getting the rule ready to be approved and published on the Federal Register. So there there's been various, kind of estimations. So, 90 days is kind of the cap for that review. There is, a, ability for them to extend to 120, but that's been used very rarely. Um, so 90 is probably the target. There has been some murmurings that they just want to speed it right through and get it done. But kind of 90 days lands us in, October, just about, or maybe November. Because it takes a couple weeks to show up in the Federal Register. They need to make sure the font and the margins are correct. Um, and it's anticipated that once it goes through, um, the review and then hits the Federal Register, the effective date will be immediate upon publication, because it was determined that, um, just upon how, the rulers that they use and how they measure, that it had no significant economic impact. That's just their analysis of it. Usually when it does have quote unquote significant economic impact, it gets a 60-day delay of implementing. But basically the people that track the stuff say, hey, it's probably going to be immediate effect. So, what that means is that 252, 204, 721, 7021 CMMC, the DFARS clause, can be put into contracts starting on that go live date after it moves through OIRA and gets published in the Federal Register. So that's going to officially kick off the 4-phase CMMC rollout. I don't know how many of you have read the 32 CFR, that kind of breaks down the rollout, but I do so in the following pages here. So you don't have to. I'll break it down for you. So kick off the 4-phase CMMC rollout. There is a caveat, in the 32 that authorizes contract officers to include CMMC language in solicitations. Um, so, they use the language will have discretion. So, during the CMMC phasing period, program managers and requiring activities will be required to include CMMC status requirements in certain, as a keyword, certain solicitations and contracts, and will have discretion to include in others. So the point of the phase rollout is to, have different waves of contracts be included. However, they've given the power to KOs to have discretion to say, you know what, actually, I want it to be included in this contract, even though that this bundle of contracts or this contract that I have is not included in the bundle that's going to be phased. So there could be, they write in, there's discretion and there's going to be oversight to make sure that people don't put it in things that they shouldn't. But, um, you know, that that the word discretion's putting a lot of work in, right, in that sentence. So we'll see. So phase one, Q4 2025. So with that, October or November, there has been a lot of chatter about, October 1st, 2025. Um, that's not a hard date. There was some, um, language or a memo. I forget the specifics of it that came out a year or so ago, or even longer, that had like a target date of October 1, 2025. For some reason, there's been, um, obviously there's been marketing. There's always marketing. But there's also been, different, trusted news sources, federal contract news and other news sources that say October 1st, 2025. Um, it could, right? It could be, but that's not been a hard and fast date that's been announced. Just FYI for everyone on the call. To add to the confusion, the Army released in SAM.gov a memo that stated October 1st, 2025, because they were running with the false information that had been reported in different news articles. And then they had retracted that statement. So a lot of people have been running with that. It's not a hard and fast definitive date. It could be that date, could be before, could be after. But we just wanted to put that out there. The effective date will be effective when they say it is. It has not been announced yet because it's still going through the appropriate channels and the appropriate process. So phase 1, back to the script here, begins on the effective date of the complementary 48 CFR. DoD intends to include the requirement for all applicable for CMMC statuses of level 1 self or level 2 self. So when they launch self-attestation or self-certification for all applicable DoD solicitations and contracts as a condition of contract award, they could include the requirement for all applicable DoD solicitations and contracts as a condition to exercise an option period. And then the famous words here, DoD may also, at its discretion, include the requirement for applicable DoD solicitations and contracts. So, important for phase 1, Q4 2025. It's going to be level 1 self and level 2 self for all applicable DoD solicitations and contracts as a condition of contract award. Then they might layer it in for exercising an option period, or include the requirement for, sorry, I glazed over this. They may also, at its discretion, include the requirement for CMMC status C3PAO in place of level 2 for applicable DoD solicitations. So let's third time's a charm. We'll go over this third time here. So self-certification, level 1, level 2, for every applicable DoD solicitation contract as a condition of contract award. They may also include the self-certification as a condition to exercise an option period on a contract awarded prior to the effective date. DoD may, at its discretion, include the requirement for CMMC C3PAO certified in place of self CMMC status for certain DoD solicitations and contracts that they choose. So everything is self for contract award. They might also add it to exercising an option for existing contracts. And then they have discretion to say, you know what, self, it's not going to cut it for this contract. We need you to have a cert for this contract. So that's phase 1, which will start as soon as it comes out. In terms of, let's see, we have a couple questions here. Interested, can level 2 self have longer poems? I mean, it is self-cert. Of course, NIST has been self-attested for forever at this point, forever and a day. So, you need to go through the appropriate self-certification and therefore perform a self-assessment for CMMC, and they're going to expect you to load that into SPRS, and they're going to expect you to load that into EMAS. For actually, I might be misspeaking there. Because I know that C3PAOs load assessments into EMAS. So at a minimum, SPRS, you're going to have to upload it into there. Whether or not, you can technically have poem items, but they need to be within a certain window. Yep. So yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, because I was thinking of, because I've been doing the CCP training and what have you, and And of course, C3PAOs, of course, are going to be using EMAS for certified, um, level 2 assessments and what have you. So phase 2 begins 1 calendar year following start date of phase 1. So if, just hypothetically, October 1 happened to be the date that it does come out to start, spooky season. My biggest thing is, what you guys need to look up is, I think could be Veterans Day, whatever whatever Friday precedes a federal holiday at 4:55 on a Friday, um, they'll come out with it, right? So I think that so keep an eye out for uh, Veterans Day, Friday before, um, to have this to have it come out then. That's just usually like how they like to roll. Um, so holiday weekend surprise. So 12 months from whenever that Friday holiday weekend surprise is going to be phase 2. So in addition to phase 1 requirements, which we hashed out multiple times, it's going to be applying to all, but going to be self unless they choose to say, hey, these definitive contracts or solicitations must have a C3PAO cert. DoD intends to include the requirement for CMFC status of level 2 C3PAO for applicable DoD solicitations and contracts as a condition of contract award. They could, so if you see here, they may at its discretion delay the inclusion of level 2 C3PAO to an option period instead of a condition of contract award. So they'll kind of gauge how it's going, how the rollout's going, how C3PAOs are burdened with getting people assessed and what have you. They may choose to have a release valve to be an option period rather than contract award. And then, and this isn't going to apply to a lot of people here because they estimate less than 1% of contracts are going to require level 3. But they may at its discretion include the requirement of level 3 for applicable DoD solicitations of contracts. So level 1, or phase 1 rather, is everything self, some C3PAO. Phase 2, they anticipate or their plan is to include the requirement for applicable, so not all, but applicable contracts as a condition of contract award. You must have a cert in hand, C3PAO, and then they will start to layer in at its discretion level 3 requirements for the applicable contracts that they target for that. And if the rollout's not going to plan or is being more sluggish, they could say, you know what, instead of contract award, we're going to do an option period. So you'll have additional time to get a cert after award. But I wouldn't count on that release valve. Then as we go into 2027, Q4 2027. So we're already, because they're starting to, so Q4 2027, it's really 2028. If you think about it. So we're talking about years in the future. But phase 3 again starts 1 calendar year after phase 2. So now, ding ding ding, all applicable. So all is doing the legwork in the sentence here. All applicable, because before it was applicable, so therefore some or maybe most. So if we kind of look at it, phase 1 is some, phase 2 is most, and then phase 3 is all. Over the rolling, the next kind of 36 months or so. So all applicable need to have C3PAO cert as a condition of contract award and as a condition to exercise an option period. And they and then of course intend to include level 3 for all applicable as a condition. And then they kind of blow off valve here, may at its discretion delay inclusion of level 3. Again, unless you've been explicitly told or hinted, or um, you I work on Navy nuclear propulsion information. Well, then, congrats, you've got level 3, or those types of jobs, those types of contracts. You know today if level 3 is in sight. It's probably not going to happen to you because it's definitely going to be communicated either by your contract officer, of course, or certain primes and what have you. So phase 1, some. Phase 2, most. Phase 3, all. Phase 1, self. Phase 2 and 3, C3PAO required assessment to happen. And then to wrap up 2028 going into 2029, full implementation. No more staggering, no more delayed rollouts, no more blow off valves or extensions. Full implementation, everything, CMMC program requirements, all applicable DoD solicitations, contracts, including option periods awarded prior to the beginning of phase 4. So that's what we're looking at. So if we go back, so July 22nd, 90 days. We're looking at October, November, unless earlier, if they really going to exit grind, maybe earlier. So definitely, I'll be reviewing, of course, on this medium, these monthlies, to let you guys know, hey, it's happening. Yeah, so phase rollout is going to start. And again, we got to worry about what discretion means, because if you have some contract officer that's hot to trot, or, well, of course, my contract's important, therefore I need CMMC now. We shall see how what kind of wrench that throws into the rollout. But this is at least kind of planned and rollout and official. This is the official rollout that was dictated in the 32 CFR. And I've provided the link to that here. Actually, I'm going to copy this and I will paste this in the chat if anyone wants to have some light reading. The meat of the rule, just to kind of review the rule, the actual content that's important is probably 20 to 25% of the total page count. Most of the page count is questions that they had to painstakingly review, organize, group, and answer, that people submitted in the when they had requests for comments. All those comments, they had to legally, they have to answer all of them. So most of the rule is Q&A of someone saying, hey, I don't like this, and them saying, too bad, and all that kind of discourse. I like, maybe because I'm weird, I like that kind of stuff, because you can feel the tenor or the kind of the attitude of whatever worker or person was responding, because some of them are really snippy and quite comedic. But the important stuff is probably 20%. So scroll through and read if you like, but it's basically everything that I covered here. I'm going to go back because there was a long question here from Kevin. Has NeQter decided that being an SPA allows you to configure the appliance in such a way to not have all 110 controls applied? We're not planning on bringing it up to our C3PAO, much like other SPAs, but I'm curious if there will be any changes to NeQter responsibility matrix coverage. Yeah, so NeQter is a security protection asset. Actually, let me just go to, so that was all kind of, that was one of the biggest things that this rule addressed, the 32 CFR. They subscribed to sanity and reducing scope and answering a lot of the questions that people had that was problematic or troublesome. So, one of the ones being security protection assets. So let me just find that real quick. Bear with me. Yeah. So these tables at the bottom are lifesavers. For anyone who hasn't read this deep into the 32 CFR rule. These tables at the bottom, actually, I will copy a short link just if anyone wants to jump to right above this table. I'll put that in the chat. So, um, they basically, kind of not redefine the scope, but really establish the parameters for what an asset is and then how it's going to be assessed, right? So for CUI asset, an asset that processes, stores, or transmits CUI, it needs to be assessed against all level 2 security requirements. That's always been the case. That hasn't changed. Of course, that makes sense. A security protection asset like NeQter or your firewall or your endpoint detection and response, et cetera, et cetera. Assets that provide security functions or capabilities to the organization seeking assessment, your CMMC assessment scope. So assess against level 2 security requirements that are relevant to the capabilities provided. So when it comes to NeQter, yes, our CMMC compliance guide, that hasn't changed. We will be refreshing that and turning it into more of a matrix as we progress in the next few months to make that more clear cut. But everything that it includes right now is still accurate. If anything, we've added more features or will be adding more features with version 3, so it needs to be updated to reflect enhanced capabilities. But the existing version, which is a couple years old at this point, still accurate. So when it comes to things like NeQter, of course, we're talking about, or actually, let me just to pull up a visual representation. It's NIST, but it's still, NIST equals CMMC level 2. When we're talking about NeQter as an SPA, auditing and accountability, right? Section 33 for logging. Of course, that makes sense. Awareness and training, that does not make sense to apply to NeQter because that is not the capabilities provided by NeQter. So an SPA, for example, would be like KnowBe4. If you're using, for example, KnowBe4 for cybersecurity awareness and training, you would be assessing that against Section 3.2 because those are the capabilities is providing. So this is your, this table is going to be your friend. The biggest thing is having appropriate scope. That's number one in terms of drawing a circle around, okay, what am I getting assessed against? What is included in my SSP? What is included in my policies and procedures? Because, I see a lot of companies, and we have a lot of customers that are manufacturers and machine shops and, et cetera, having shop floors. Well, your shop floor equipment should not be a CUI asset. It is an operational technology and should be scoped as specialized, right? So I'm not going to obviously cover all of the nuances and all of the different things, but this table is your friend in terms of determining, step one, what are my data flows? How do things flow in and out of my company? And what assets are within those data flows and how do they get appropriately categorized in this table here? Another table that is very important is, I might have to scroll down instead of up, is this one right here. That 32 CFR really cleaned up because there was a big debate, a big question about, well, what is a cloud security, provider, or what is a cloud? What is an MSP? What is an external service provider? So cloud service provider, external service provider, managed service provider. They actually spell out in here what is an MSP, because there was a lot of questions about FedRAMP and stuff like that, which was before it was really a black hole of, well, because my MSP provides services and they use this, does that mean they need FedRAMP and all of those kinds of questions? If you never had those worries or were part of those conversations, I wish I was you, because it was it was a lot. It was very confusing. So this table here also clears things up for you to know if you're using um, a company that a perfect example. Um, and yeah, thank you, Nick. He posted a link to the CMMC assessment scope, level 2 um, scoping guide in the chat there. But it's also in here as well. But yeah, like, so for example, if you are taking CUI and storing it in a cloud service provider, like Microsoft, they need to be FedRAMP, for example. But if you are storing in, if you're renting, server rack storage or what have you, well, that's not a cloud. That's just you hosting a server somewhere. Well, that's going to be assessed within your scope and what have you. So understanding these relationships and kind of drawing a Venn diagram of coverage is going to be crucial for you to kind of understand if you're dealing with a external service provider that is a cloud or is not a cloud, or what are they providing. Well, I'm working with an MSP that provides EDR services. Okay, well, if there's no CUI going there, then you're good. But for some external, for some like endpoint detection and response, where they sample data and send it up to their cloud, well, now that needs to be FedRAMP, or that feature needs to be turned off. So I won't. This is a whole other. This is a whole other conversation. But understanding where you kind of line up on understanding that the new changes with 32 CFR, very, very important as you scope and kind of, sharpen your tools and get ready for assessment. But, number one is understanding, okay, the phases, what are the next 3 to 4 years look like? How, you know, how close am I to the sun? Right? Icarus, how close am I to getting a contract that DoD is going to scrutinize and put maybe a level 2 cert requirement in before, just having uh, a self-assessed CMMC, just being aware, understanding. But this is all DoD that we've been talking about so far. Um, we've seen emails and letters from primes that say, hey, you're in our supply chain. Our supply chain is very important to us. It is our competitive advantage. We need to provide continuous earnings to shareholders, and we cannot have any injected risk with the companies that we use. So outside of DoD beating their drum, Lockheed, Boeing, the long list, have been sending out communications saying, cool, while DoD is doing this thing, and we're going to make sure that everyone is in line before that phase rollout. So you need to have, to work with us, you need to have an L2 cert if you're providing, if you're on these jobs with us. So really, right now, the biggest thing that I can really point to is being aware, knowing where you are in your supply chain, knowing where you are with your contract officer, with the type of work that you provide, and essentially, when do you have to pony up and set money aside to get a CMMC assessment from a C3PAO? Because the smallest environments, like a 5-person VDI environment, the floor is still $50,000 for an L2 assessment. And that's not because they're making a lot of money on it. The 32 CFR rule mandated certain numbers of, they need to have a CCA, and 2 CCPs on every assessment and a QA person. So essentially 3 or 4 people per assessment. So, and you got to go through all 320 assessment objectives. So you can only make it so lean and efficient. Those are the numbers that you're going to be looking at. So understanding where and when you got to circle on the calendar for this is the absolutely drop dead date where I need to go and get an assessment is going to be crucial moving forward. So I need to double check. I think there's a couple more C3PAOs. There might be 80 or so on the marketplace. We know several. Um, so if you need help with that, we can help kind of pair up or at least, get you meetings and interview. It's probably a whole other, we should have a webinar on that with interviewing your C3PO to make sure, or prospective C3PO to make sure you're speaking the same language. They understand the environment that you use. They understand the type of data that you handle, and that you're on the same page so that uh, they want to be successful. You want to be successful. They have no interest in just getting the check and failing someone because that makes their reputation look bad. So that might be some time spent on a separate discussion on those things. So I appreciate everyone bearing with me from last week's snag and following me into this week. But as you can see, the update, I talked about it for 15 minutes, and the rest has been talking about CMMC. So any questions on? I actually apologize. We ran up to the time here. I know I never usually do that, so I appreciate everyone kind of staying on with me here. These are recorded and will be put up on our YouTube. Let me know if you have any questions that I can answer now as we kind of wrap up the call. And one other thing that I'm going to be reaching out separately, I have to some of you so far, is just probably needs to have its own slide here, but we're already at the end here. Is just our customer referral program that you can take advantage of if you know anyone. And it doesn't have to be, it could be people that you work with or even compete against. But suppliers upstream, downstream. If you're a machine shop, you use someone for processing or uh, for processing or coding or anodizing or something like that, and that you flow down stuff to them. Um, the customer referral program is essentially you refer them, we talk with them, they like NeQter, they adopt NeQter, you get a free month, they get a free month. That's kind of how we're doing it. So if anyone has any interest with that, reaching out to me is best point of contact for that. If that is something that you guys are interested in, so I'll reach out on that separately. Anyone, appreciate everyone's time. Give you the rest of your week back. Enjoy the last fleeting bits of summer that we have, and we will talk again in a few weeks. Thank you, everyone, for your time today.